Let's start with what has to be humanity's oldest, most nagging question. What happens the very instant we die?
It's the ultimate mystery.
Exactly. And
Yep.
for millennia, we've relied on faith or philosophy or even folklore to try and get some kind of answer.
But those are all based on belief.
Right. But what if we could just sidestep all of that? What if we could move beyond the speculation and dive into actual hard-won clinical data, the kind that's been compiled over decades of practice?
And that's the crucial distinction for our deep dive today. We aren't wading into, armchair philosophy, and we're not even really talking about the typical near-death experiences or NDEs that you hear so much about.
Which are temporary by definition.
Right. We're looking at a system of research that claims to access something much deeper, essentially the living, eternal memory of the soul itself.
Today, we are immersing ourselves in the remarkable research compiled by Dr. Michael Newton. Now, he was a hypnotherapist who, and this is key, began his career as a staunch skeptic, focused entirely on traditional cognitive therapy.
He was as mainstream as they come.
We're going straight to the source material, and we're going to be looking very closely at the methodology and the foundational experience captured in Case 1, Death and Separation, from his book, Journey of Souls.
Our mission today is really to follow the detailed report of a soul transitioning out of the physical body. Dr. Newton used this unique form of deep hypnotic regression to get at what he called the non-temporary, lasting memories of that transition.
So not a fleeting NDE, but the soul's actual memory of leaving one body and traveling through the spiritual environment.
The interlife, as he calls it, that whole period until the next incarnation.
And we're going to follow the account of a young soul, a subject who died very suddenly during the 1918 flu epidemic. This case is it's so pivotal because it captures that raw, immediate experience.
Those first moments of separation, the shock, and the first steps of the transition, it really does set the baseline for understanding the entire process he lays out.
It's so important, I think, to start with Dr. Newton's own origin story, because it really speaks to the rigor he tried to apply. He didn't set out to map the afterlife.
Not at all. He was, as you said, a highly specialized, evidence-based counselor. His focus was traditional therapy, cognitive restructuring for psychological disorders.
So he was the guy who would ask things like, what function does this depression serve? Or what's the consequence of you holding on to this belief?
Precisely. All about linking thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Very logical, very here and now. So the question becomes, how did that man pivot 180 degrees to write books about soul contracts and spirit guides?
It seems like an impossible leap.
It was a completely accidental discovery. It came from a clinical challenge he just couldn't solve with his standard methods. Early on, he had actually resisted doing past life therapy.
He found it unscientific.
Totally. He said it was out of line with his practice. His interest in reincarnation was purely academic until he got this one patient, a young man with a baffling chronic pain in his right side that had plagued him his entire life.
And nothing had worked. No medical treatments?
Nothing. No medical, no psychological treatments had touched it. So Dr. Newton was using a standard hypnotherapy technique for chronic pain.
Which is often to, encourage the subject to intensify the pain to find its source.
Exactly. You intensify it to gain insight and mental control over it. And during one of these sessions, the patient suddenly visualized being violently stabbed.
Oh.
Yeah. Dr. Newton, just trying to follow the image to resolve the trauma, encouraged him to follow it back to its absolute origin. And when he did, the patient surfaced the memory of a past life.
Don't tell me.
He was a soldier, killed by a bayonet in the trenches of World War I France.
That is incredibly specific. So, not a metaphor. He was actually reliving the moment of death.
He was reliving it, and the defining moment for Dr. Newton wasn't the vision itself, as wild as that was. It was the immediate clinical outcome.
The pain.
Once that past life trauma was identified, expressed, and therapeutically resolved, the chronic, lifelong physical pain completely and permanently disappeared.
Just gone.
Gone. And that clinical success, achieved through this totally unorthodox method, it just caused a seismic shift in his whole understanding of what the mind holds.
I can imagine. That must have just redefined his entire professional boundary. It opened the door to past life regression, obviously, but the spiritual world itself, the interlife, that's still a huge step beyond just recounting an old life on Earth, isn't it?
It is a big one. Past life regression, by itself, focuses on the life lived here. But Dr. Newton quickly realized that exploring the time between lives was often far more meaningful and restorative for his subjects than just rehashing old earthly histories. So he began practicing and refining the method until he could reliably guide patients not just into past lives, but into the expansive neutral memory of the soul world itself.
Okay, so let's unpack that methodology because everything, I mean, the credibility of this entire body of work, it all rests on the quality and the depth of that trance state he was able to induce.
Absolutely.
The goal here isn't just tapping into childhood memories or past traumas. It's reaching a level of consciousness that holds the absolute, unbiased truth of the interlife. So how did he map the mind to even get there?
He used a model of 3 concentric circles of the mind, each one nested inside the other. The whole process is this systematic journey designed to bypass the outer layers to reach that innermost core of pure knowledge.
Can you give us the breakdown of those 3 layers?
Of course. So we start with the outer layer, which is the conscious mind. This is the critical, analytical part of us. It's the source of our reasoning, our doubt, our skepticism.
This is the part of me right now that's analyzing everything you're saying.
Exactly. It's the part that, while you're awake, would argue, this is impossible, or I must be making this up. So in deep hypnosis, this part has to be quieted down. But, and this is crucial, never completely erased.
Why not? I would have thought deep trance means a total blackout of the conscious mind.
That's a common misconception. For this kind of therapeutic goal, if the conscious mind were totally gone, the subject couldn't articulate or report the experience. You need it to be the narrator.
I see. So it has to be quiet enough to stop interfering, but active enough to report what the inner layers are showing it.
Precisely. Then you get to the second layer, which is the subconscious. This is the reservoir of memory you access first in hypnosis. It holds all the experiences of your current life, previous lives, all your traumas.
And that's where most standard past life regression therapy stops, right? You find a trauma in the subconscious, you resolve it, and the therapy is a success.
Exactly. But for Dr. Newton, the ultimate destination was the innermost core, which he calls the superconscious mind, or sometimes just the soul itself.
And this is different from just a memory bank.
Very different. This is the highest center of knowledge and perspective. It represents our true eternal identity. It's characterized not just by memory, but by this profound wisdom. It acts as the direct connection to a higher intelligent force, and it's the source of all the data he collected about the spiritual world.
So if the subconscious is the hard drive where we store everything we did, the superconscious is the intelligent operating system running the whole show.
Yeah.
It's the source of everything we are.
That's a great way to put it. And critically, this layer reports data neutrally. It doesn't have the filter of human judgment or ego or fear.
That's a key insight, isn't it? The data is emotionally detached.
Completely. It operates beyond our human concepts of good and bad or failure. And this neutral reporting, combined with the really remarkable consistency he saw across thousands of diverse, unconnected subjects from all over the world, that became his primary evidence against the charge that his subjects were just fantasizing.
Or that he was leading them.
Right. How could thousands of people from different cultures, speaking different languages, with different belief systems, all report the exact same structure of the spiritual world if they were just making it up?
That consistency is really compelling. But let's tackle the skepticism head on. The trance state itself. People will say they're just dreaming or hallucinating.
Yeah.
How does the research clarify the specific hypnotic state he used?
We have to look at the brainwave activity. When we're awake, like we are now, we're in beta waves. When a subject enters a trance, those waves slow down. They pass through alpha, which is that deeply relaxed meditative state, and they enter the much deeper theta field.
Theta. That's a deep hypnosis phase. What makes theta the ideal state for this? Why not say delta?
Because delta is the state of deep sleep, full unconsciousness. If a subject were in delta, the memories would just come out as dreams, and when they woke up, they'd have zero conscious recall.
The messages would just bypass the conscious mind entirely.
Exactly. But theta is this unique transitional phase. The conscious mind is not unconscious. It's just bypassed enough that it stops filtering everything, but it's still active enough to be the reporter.
So in theta, the person is simultaneously accessing these incredibly deep layers of memory and actively reporting them back to the therapist in real time. It's like having a secure open channel between the soul and the microphone.
That's a perfect description. And the induction method is key. He developed this very specific, lengthy process using deep physical and visual relaxation cues to make sure the descent into theta was gradual and secure.
And only then would he start asking the big questions.
Only when the subject showed complete physical relaxation and zero eye movement, indicating the conscious mind was fully sidelined. And in that state, they can't lie about the memories they access. They just report what they see, like an objective observer.
Which brings us directly to the core document. Case 1. A young man taken suddenly by the 1918 flu. The death would have been violent, rapid. Let's get out of the methodology and into the experience. What were those first few moments of separation like for him?
The transition is it's captured in this astonishing fragmented detail. He was reliving the moment of death, that physical release from the hospital bed. And his initial words under hypnosis, they just convey this staggering, immediate realization that completely overrides all the suffering he'd just been through.
What was the first thing he said?
He spoke in these excited, breathless gasps. He said, "My God, I actually haven't died, or have I? I mean, my body is dead. I can see it below, but I'm floating in the air. I can look down and see my body lying motionless on the hospital bed."
Wow. I must be dead, but I'm still alive? This is incredible. That's the emotional paradox, isn't it? The body is an object, a vessel of agony under a sheet. But his consciousness is reporting profound survival and freedom.
The relief is instantaneous. The second the spirit separates, the physical suffering of that terrible flu just ceases. And the intense realization is, I'm okay, I'm lighter.
So the dominant feelings are relief and curiosity, not fear or confusion. That just seems so counterintuitive.
It really does, but it speaks to the soul's inherent knowledge. The fear of death belongs entirely to the conscious mind and the physical body. Once the spirit separates, that fear is just shed. The relief comes from the lightness, literally shedding the earthly body load.
The source notes that this subject was identified as a young soul. How does that classification affect the speed and nature of his transition?
That's a really important point. The concept of a young soul just means an individual who is less accustomed to the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. For this subject, it meant the process of mentally adapting to the spirit form took a little bit longer than average.
So a more experienced soul might just detach and move on immediately?
Almost immediately, yes. They know the drill. But for the young soul, they require more time to process the sheer visual shock and to mentally acclimatize to the fact that they are no longer physical.
The astonishment of still being conscious is more intense for them. They have to kind of reconcile the image of their own dead body with the fact that they feel totally fine.
Precisely. The visual and emotional shock is greater because they haven't been through it hundreds of times before. They spend a noticeable period, maybe what feels like a few minutes, just revisiting the scene, trying to grasp the reality that they're functioning perfectly well without lungs or nerves or a heart.
That initial period of observation is universal then, but the duration varies with experience.
That's right.
So this immediate aftermath, while it's free from pain, it sounds pretty disorienting. The spirit is still there, anchored, watching the scene. What does he try to do? I mean, we always hear stories about spirits trying to interact with the people left behind.
That's exactly what he did. As a young soul, he's still emotionally tied to the physical world, so he immediately tried to communicate with the weeping nurses and any relatives who were there. He actually said under hypnosis, "I want to shout, hey, I'm not dead."
Of course. They feel this urgency to stop the pain of the living, which they can see so clearly.
Exactly. But this is the first profound frustration for a newly separated spirit, the total futility of trying to interact. First, you have the physical limitations. Spirits float, and they struggle immensely to touch or influence solid objects. The material world just loses its solidity to them.
Oh, they're just passing through things.
Right. They exhaust themselves trying to speak, to move things, just to get anyone's attention, and nobody responds. Nobody even registers their presence.
So there's a vibrational gap they can't cross. But the research suggests the real reason, the deeper reason, is actually the emotional state of the living. It's an emotional barrier, not just a mechanical one.
That is the core insight here. The main reason for the communication failure isn't the spirit's lack of ability, it's the emotional trauma of the living. Their grief, their shock. It can so completely overwhelm their minds that their ability to establish that subtle mental communication is it's completely blocked.
So intense, consuming grief acts like a dense vibrational shield, a kind of static.
That's a perfect analogy. If the living person is entirely consumed by the pain of what they think is an eternal loss, they can't open that subtle channel to hear the comforting signal from the spirit, who is often standing right there trying to say, "I'm okay."
That makes so much sense. The spirit knows they'll see their loved ones again, but the living feel like the loss is forever, and that despair just drowns everything else out.
It creates a noise that blocks the signal. The spirit's first act is almost always trying to get through that barrier, to ease that pain before they move on.
Dr. Newton's own story about his mother's death is such a fascinating piece of evidence for how this barrier can be broken, even for just a moment.
It's a perfect illustration of how it works. After his mother died suddenly from a heart attack, he and his sister were, devastated. But later that night, in separate rooms, they both reached a state of deep receptive relaxation, what he called the alpha state. They were momentarily free of that all-consuming grief.
And when they reached that relaxed state,
His mother appeared to them both simultaneously, not as a physical thing, but as a dreamy, slightly floating white shape that came through their subconscious minds. She just smiled.
to let them know she was okay.
To convey her acceptance and to confirm that she was fine and free of pain. It was a brief, powerful communication that provided this profound, meaningful closure before they both fell into a deep delta sleep.
So communication is possible, but it requires the living to temporarily suspend the power of their grief. It's not that the deceased is absent, it's that the living are too emotionally saturated to perceive their subtle presence.
The spirit is never far away in those early moments. They're waiting for an opening, trying repeatedly to send messages of love, of hope, of assurance that they're in a good place. We only sense them when our own grief momentarily clears.
Okay, so as the initial shock wears off, and the spirit, in this case, accepts that shouting at the living isn't working, his attention shifts to the transition itself. And this is where we get the elements we've heard about from NDEs. The bright light and the tunnel.
Huh.
How did Case 1 perceive them?
As soon as the spirit emotionally detaches from the scene, all the subjects report a definite sense of being pulled or drawn away. It's not a passive floating, it's a guided movement by some invisible, intelligent energy leading them to the spiritual threshold.
And that leads to the tunnel.
It inevitably leads to the experience of the tunnel effect. But it wasn't immediate for him. He was drawn toward a brilliant whiteness. The research notes that some subjects are immediately surrounded by this bright light, but others, like this young soul, initially see the brightness at a distance.
So they're drawn towards it from a darker place.
A darker, less defined, energetic area that's closer to Earth. And that darkness isn't menacing, it's just the absence of that spiritual light.
So the light is the destination. The tunnel is the entryway, the conduit of consciousness, separating the soul from the immediate earthly plane.
That's right. But before the spirit can fully enter that pure realm, there's this striking transformation that happens with their hearing, which is just incredible. It's a transition from jarring sounds to profound, restorative music.
Tell me about that sound shift. What does he hear right after leaving the body?
In those early stages of floating, some subjects report a buzzing or static or humming sounds. Dr. Newton said it was like standing near large telephone wires, just these flat frequencies heard right before the spirit is pulled away from the Earth's astral plane.
It's so interesting that patients under general anesthesia also report that flat, ringing sound. It seems tied to the state of being disembodied.
It connects the phenomenon directly to the separation of consciousness from the physical vessel. But as the spirit moves into and through the tunnel, that flat, mechanical ringing sound becomes distinctly musical.
What did Case 1 describe?
He described it vividly. He said he heard an echo of music, a musical chime, the sound of bells vibrating with my movements. It was incredibly soothing and relaxing.
Wow, so the energy of his own movement is creating harmonious sound. Pure auditory bliss.
And that transformation is deeply significant. The subjects call this music the universal energy. Its sole function seems to be restorative. It refreshes, it cleanses, it invigorates the soul during this critical phase.
It suggests the soul retains a memory of physical senses, but in a pure, amplified form.
Absolutely. Case 1 noted that even the memory of smell and taste remained with him, but amplified by the beautiful nature of these musical waves. The intensity of this energy is profoundly restorative. It signals the spirit's entry into a more harmonious reality.
So he's passed through the tunnel, refreshed by this universal energy. The shock is gone. What's the immediate sense of place for the soul once they realize they haven't died, but just shed the earthly body load?
The immediate impression is an overwhelming, inviting feeling of well-being, a deep, unshakable sense of peace. And this is universal across all subjects, and it's instantaneous.
They aren't dead, they're liberated.
Exactly. And the realization is met with this profound acceptance and often a huge sigh of relief. A common reaction Dr. Newton heard was a phrase like, "Wonderful, I am home again in this beautiful place."
A feeling of returning home.
Especially for those who had long illnesses or traumatic deaths. The feeling of being fully accepted is immediate and deeply profound.
But the source said that for Case 1, the area he entered was still a bit unclear or undefined visually. Why isn't it crystal clear if he's in the spirit world?
This is attributed to the density of the nearest energetic field surrounding Earth. Some traditions, like the Theosophists, call it Kamaloka. It's basically the realm closest to the physical plane, a vibrational residue that's dense with lingering, unresolved terrestrial energies and thoughts.
So it's a transitional feel, not the final destination. It's the energetic static of Earth clinging to the astral boundary.
Precisely. Another subject, who I think was an engineer in life, described moving through this area not as up or down, but across energetic planes. He called it mostly non-material energy layered with fluctuating light and dark variations.
That's such a technical description. No poetry, just pure energetic data from the superconscious.
It's completely consistent with the data he gathered. The density of these astral planes decreases as the spirit moves farther from Earth's psychological and emotional influence.
But in the midst of this layered, sometimes confusing field, is the spirit alone?
Absolutely not, and this is a foundational finding of the research. The spirit is never, ever truly alone or helpless during this transition. Invisible, intelligent energy is always guiding each spirit. And crucially, they are immediately met by guides or soulmates at the entrance gate.
A welcoming committee is waiting at the arrival gate.
They are. They're there to offer instant remembrance, profound compassion, and reassurance that they are in the best possible condition.
And what's the function of these guides? Orientation.
It's deeper than that. Their presence is vital, especially for young souls like Case 1. They offer immediate remembrance, helping the soul shed the amnesia of human life and recall their true eternal identity. They offer compassion for the life just completed and gentle reassurance. It confirms the transition is a structured, supervised, and carefully managed return home.
It's not a chaotic arrival into the unknown.
Not at all. The guides ensure the soul is ready for the next stages of the interlife, which is usually the life review.
Wow. What stands out to me most from this deep dive into Case 1 is the sheer consistency and the profound, intelligent order behind this whole transition. I mean, death in this context is not darkness or chaos at all.
It's a moment of immediate physical relief, profound self-recognition, and movement toward an organized, luminous environment.
Yeah. The initial moments revealed in the case, the floating, the relief, the failed communication because of grief, the transformation of sound into music, it all paints a surprisingly peaceful and predictable picture. It goes way beyond what a fleeting, fear-driven NDE can provide.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Case 1 just confirms Dr. Newton's long-term finding. Death is not an end. It is a transformation. It's a metamorphosis where we lose the burden of the body, but our eternal life energy unites with the power of a divine supreme soul.
And it's all guided.
Guided home by trusted companions. The key takeaway, really, for you listening, is the absolute continuity of consciousness. Despite that intense natural memory loss that happens when a soul merges with a human brain, that necessary amnesia, the superconscious identity holds all the data. It's all there.
And that memory connection, like in the story about Dr. Newton's mother, suggests we have this latent ability to connect with loved ones who've passed on. If we can just momentarily set aside the paralyzing effect of our own grief and relax the mind enough to receive that subtle communication.
It challenges us to rethink how we process loss. It also challenges the whole societal view of death as some kind of failure. For the soul, in Case 1, his sudden death was just a short, intense experience, followed by immediate liberation and a prompt return to his true home.
So what does this all mean for us right now while we're still here? The source suggests that our critical, analytical, conscious mind is only the outer layer, the filter of our true vast identity.
Which really raises a question for you to mull over. If that superconscious is our highest center of wisdom, holding all our history, our plans, our connection to a higher force,
Then what?
what practical daily techniques could we adopt to bypass that critical filter and tap into that vast, knowledgeable inner core, the superconscious, even while we are awake, driving our cars, or sitting in meetings?
That's a question that suggests the greatest journey we'll ever take might not involve passing through a tunnel at all, but just turning inward and listening to the wisdom that's already there.
The memory is already there. We just need to stop shouting and start listening.
Until next time, keep digging, keep learning, and keep exploring your own deep dive.